Chip Webster, thank you so much for making time for our program.
You bet.
So I wanted to start off with, that we don't. You're not necessarily an academic researcher in this field of polarization, but you're certainly boots on the ground, a practitioner leading real life efforts. So from that perspective, what do you think is something that feels to you is most misunderstood about how polarization actually shows up in the real world?
For me, I think it's driven by the political conversation. Politicians are encouraged to go to the extreme. So I think that's a big contributor to it. And I think, the old if it leads in the media exacerbates it. I facilitated many CEO groups. I've been on boards with very diverse people politically. The CEO groups were more diverse than most people think they would be. And what we find out is that we're all trying to accomplish basically the same thing. And if we listen to each other, we can come to compromise. But I think what's exacerbating it, once again, is the national conversation is not a conversation, but it's a food fight. I don't know if you know the poet David White, but I heard him speak one time and he talked about how the conversation is the relationship. And we have a very low level conversation going on, which also is contributed to the reduction of trust. If you look at the trust statistics back in the 50s, 72% of the people thought the United States was going in the right direction. Now it's about 22%.
Yeah, it's crazy. Um, so, speaking of that, so in terms of dialogue, and there's a lot of good, well-intentioned, well-meaning folks out there that kind of focus on conversation and dialogue. In your experience, sort of when does dialogue not work, or what tends to stall or derail it?
Well, it's when you start out needing to be heard before you listen. I think a really good, and it's not easy to do, but is start out by asking questions. When somebody states something that's a little bit different or a lot different than what you think, you just say, tell me more. But if I'm sitting here from the outset of that conversation saying you're wrong, you know what you're talking about, there is no conversation. It's just going to be a yelling contest. So step back and ask a simple question. Tell me more about that. I'm curious. And when they answer, then say, tell me more. Keep asking questions. Expand on that. What's the impact of that? But never ask, why do you feel that way? Because now it's personal. It's always about them talking about themselves. And then at the end, when they seem to have run out of gas, then your job is to repeat it back to them so that they know that they've been heard. People can't really hear you until they've been heard. So the responsibility of the more mature of the two is to be the one that asks the questions and let the other person know they've been heard. Then, which is my knee-jerk reaction is, well, now you need to listen to me. No, actually, you do is you say, thank you. And if they want to hear from you, they'll ask. And if they don't at that point, you see them again in the future, they probably will. But it's so natural to, I want to hear, have people hear my voice, my story. And progress is not made that way.
Well, another thing that happens in those conversations is if people sort of start just repeating, the latest kind of messaging going on Fox or MSNBC or whatever, right? And that can be difficult because it's sometimes hard to, go from there. You have any advice in that situation?
Yeah, I think, is there any other angle that you're looking at? Another way to ask that is, what was the source of, of this particular statement or this particular perspective? Uh, just digging more or help expand on that. If they're saying that, the problem is all the foreigners, all the people that aren't citizens. Well, expand on that. Are we talking about everybody who's an immigrant? Are we talking about just people who are illegally? Are we talking about people that have committed crimes? Get dig down, and what you'll find is people will either back off or they'll have a very specific group. No, it's people between, 18 and 45 that have committed murder that need to go. Okay, now we have something.
So
Question
you.
the
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
question the answer.
Hmm. And so you've sort of centered, as service as a sort of way, as a way to maybe make progress here. Um,
Mhm.
from a practical perspective, what does, say a shared service accomplish that these discussion approaches maybe don't?
Well, what I've learned doing service, and I'll use Tampa Bay Watch as an example. We have a board that's very diverse politically, but we have a bigger vision. We're trying to clean the bay. We're trying to educate people about the bay. So we're part of something that's bigger than ourselves, and we're working together towards a common goal. So we don't focus on the other parts. So if there's once we realize the need for us working together, then if there's something that needs to be adjudicated or discussed, wrong word adjudicated, but discussed, that's a little more left or right, you have enough respect to each other for each other that you listen. And one of the things that when I was a kid, my mom always said, trust other people's motives. And as long as I know that you're trying to do the right thing, I can trust your motive. If I don't trust your motive, that's a whole different conversation or non-conversation. But I trust the motives of the people that voted differently than I do because they're really good people. They're trying to, make the world better, and we're doing it together. And it's much easier to compromise. As you know, democracy requires compromise. What we've created is this party first. I'm a Republican. I can't vote for anything the Democrats want. I'm a Democrat. I can't vote for anything that the Republicans want. That's a stalemate, and it's unsustainable.
Right. Well, right, and it's become a bad word, right? It's come like a bad word to say words like compromise or building coalitions, right?
Yeah, yeah. Tell me how democracy works without that, please.
Yeah.
Just give me a clue.
Well, and I will say that for a lot of people, they have been sold this idea that our side will somehow dominate with such a majority that, yeah, we won't have to compromise. But it's like it's a
Well, then
pipe dream for either side.
well, that's not democracy. Once you get to that point, look at there's some cities that you can see in states around the country you can see that are so dominated by one party or the other, and quite frankly, most of them are some level of dysfunctional. They're not pure democracy.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. So it's so it sounds like we learned one thing already about some of the things that set up the conditions for this to work, and that is kind of having a shared vision that people can sign off on. What are some other conditions that matter most for a service project to succeed?
Let me go back because you made an interesting point about working together. One of the things that gets said so few times, it's so important, is we need each other. We have these visions of people being independent and they can go off and build their own little compound and they'll be safe. No, actually, they won't. And they need, if they're into doing their own farming, they need plows and they need shovels that are made someplace else. They can't make them. The whole system is about needing each other and giving each other value. And so I think that's one of the things that you have to start out with the base. We need each other. Your question, if I remember correctly, was about okay, working together towards a bigger goal. How do you communicate that, and how does that relate? And I don't know if you played any sports, but when you're playing a sport, it's not about me; it's about the team. I don't. I have a hard time with these professional athletes. They're not passing me the ball enough, or I don't get to take enough shots off the team. John Wooden would have kicked him off. Yeah. Uh, and so it's about us. And yes, how can I contribute? But if I win by myself, I probably won't win tomorrow. But if I win as a team, I can probably win a lot of games.
Hmm. Right, and we've seen that in real life. That's what's so funny. Like we know the pattern
Yeah,
is there, but somehow we sometimes forget it. Um, a lot of these things are like that. I feel like we already know some of these things, and we somehow still
right.
forget.
It's one of the reasons I love sports is because if you study it, it's really a microcosm of society and of organizations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it always baffles me that somebody could have a lot of experience in a sports environment and somehow still find themselves very polarizing outside that context. It's like, didn't you see how it worked in sports?
Yeah,
Wouldn't you want to
yeah.
also do that over here? Yeah.
What were you thinking?
Yeah. So you've spent quite a bit of energy mentoring leaders. So,
Mhm.
what behaviors tend to reduce in leaders tend to reduce have a more likely outcome of having reduced those sort of tension and divided groups, and which ones maybe unintentionally inflame division?
Well, I'm going to. I remember interviewing back in the early mid '80s. I was interviewing potential new CEOs, and I asked this one CEO, "Well, tell me about your culture." And he goes, I've always wanted to have a culture." I thought, okay, this is a football, So to answer your question, I think people who are intentional and aware of the culture and how we need each other are much more effective than the ones who it's once again all about me. I visited one guy, he had like 250 employees, and I kept trying to get him to talk about his team. He said, I do it all. No, I actually don't do it all. So I think ego of the CEO has a lot to do with it, of the leader. And I think this is true with profits and nonprofits. But when someone is able to articulate the vision and how each of us contribute to it, and how each of us will benefit from it, and that we all need each other, um, that's the gold standard. I don't know if you ever read the book, The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. I highly recommended it. He's a guy that took over a company that was a failing division of International Harvester and bought it with his management team and led it to success. And he understood everybody participates. Everybody in the company understood how they contributed to the P&L and L and the greater vision. And I walked through his factories. He actually spun off about 30 businesses because of the way he dealt with people. And everybody knew him. And I had other clients he was in the diesel engine remanufacturing business. So if you think of anything dirtier than taking an old diesel truck engine, tearing it down and rebuilding it, I can't think of anything greasier or dirtier. And you'd walk through his plant and it was clean. I've walked through other ones that look like they just poured the oil on the floor. So it goes back to leadership. It goes back to communication and having everybody feel like they're part of the team and nobody's bigger or better than anybody else. We all need each other.
Hmm. So there's a lot of cynicism, I should say, and we've talked a little bit about the distrust,
Mhm.
and people sort of get disengaged as a result
Mhm.
and become apathetic. Um,
Mhm.
so what have you seen to help people re-engage, without sort of feeling, I don't know, naive or maybe manipulated?
Well, I think, first of all, if the CEO of a company is so egocentric and thinks that he or she are God's gift to whatever the industry is, that's not fixable. A new person has to come in and set a whole new standard, a whole new culture. And one of my favorite CEOs, unfortunately, after we went public, he passed away. But his whole theory was first you build the team, then the team builds the business. And we've all heard, get the right people on the bus and get them in the right seats. But it's the team and that team effort that makes it happen. And I think it has to be sincere. So I don't think there's any magic bullet other than listening. And one of the great turnaround experts I got to know would go into the company and go down into the ranks and sit down and ask everybody from different departments and several people, if you are running the business, what would you do? And listen. And he said so much of the problems were around apathy. I've told the leaders this 10 times, you need to turn up the machine 3% and we can produce 50% more or whatever. Um, Nobody's listened to them. So I guess listening and validating um, is a big part of it. And then having a vision of how we all win together.
In terms of civics, what do you see service-based approaches, or how do you see them helping? And maybe where do they tend to not scale? Where does it sort of the scaling run out?
Well, I would say with a lot of things, it's how many people are involved. Uh, there's been several studies about, you can have 150 people working in an organization, everybody can work together up to about 250. And, if you get so big that not everybody can work together, then you need to spin it off. Um, I think that the upside of working together is feeling like you're part of something bigger than yourself. I know I'm repeating myself, but also um, when you walk away, when I drive across Tampa Bay, going over to from St. Pete to Tampa, I look at the water and remember when I raced here in the 70s in sailboats, the water was kind of chocolatey, and now it's clear. So, I think if you have been part of like Paint Your Heart Out Tampa Bay, or some of the other organizations um, that build things or turn things around. You just have that sense of participation and ownership. And if you can't get that, uh, then I think that's what dissipates. If you feel like you've gone, I mean, I don't know about you, I've been to a lot of meetings that were a waste of time that was supposed to do good. And all we did is sit around and talk, and there were no results. So I guess that's the other side. People need to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves and that we're getting results.
And in unity and service and the volunteerism and civic action that folks do there, what do you think are some of the keys to what have you seen in terms of changes in people who go through this program, and what do you think some of the keys to those changes are?
Well, the book's relatively new, and we don't have any specific program of, I'm just getting people to read the book and think about what is my responsibility as a citizen? What are the things I need to hold the government accountable for? Those are the first big themes. Then it's breaking down by volunteering. And then my big ask is that we have universal service. You turn 18 years old and you serve the country for a year, working on projects, CCC kind of projects, rebuilding the national parks, building houses, doing Habitat for Humanity projects. Um, that's what I'm encouraging. It's more of a call to action than it is. My dream now is to get enough support that we can put together a national advertising campaign. I don't think people really understand that we have the government we deserve. I did 5 loops when COVID came. My wife and I bought an RV and we did 5 loops of the US, about 6 months at a time. Seattle, San Diego, St. Louis, Philadelphia, St. Pete. And we'd be in RV parks and start talking to people. And it always drifts into complaining about the country. And I'd always say, you know what? It's our fault. And they'd look at me like I had two heads. Um, it is our fault. We're a democracy. If we don't like the direction the government's going in, only we can change it. It is a do-it-to-ourselves project. And so I think that the call to action of the book is get out of, turn off the TV, unplug your computer, and go out and engage with people. Um, at some point in time, maybe in the conversation, I'll read my poem Micro Validations, but it all starts with one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have similar conversations with people sometimes, and the sort of cycle that I often hear is kind of this idea that you know government can't get anything done, or often Congress isn't getting anything done, right?
Right.
And you say, well, who's your representative? And why do you vote for them, right? And well, because they're out there fighting. It's like, okay, well, how many laws have they written? How many times have they co-sponsored a bill? How many times have they done a bipartisan bill? Oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know any of those things, right? And so, we tend to elect, like you say, we're electing the people that we're getting the government we want because we literally reelect. If they're loud and they scream and they yell at the right people, we reelect them. We don't even look at what they do.
We've made it too hard for good people to run. If you run, you're going to get stuff talked about when you're in junior high. I mean, you may be 50 years old, and that's a long time ago, or out and out lies, told by the opposition. There was an election where a president that was said that he didn't do his income tax or hadn't paid any income tax, which is a bold lie. And after the other party won, they said, "Well, we won the election, didn't we?" It's like, what? So we have to make it easier on individuals and families to run for office. We have to hold people accountable uh, for what they say and do. But it's very hard now, and the only people that can change it is us. And if you think about it, Dave, in the Revolutionary War, about a third of the people were for the revolution, about a third were Tories, and about a third were sitting on the fence, waiting to see what would happen. So a small group of independent thinkers who put nation ahead of party and come together and work towards holding politicians accountable, holding the media accountable, then we can make some progress.
And part of holding people accountable, or holding like a representatives accountable, is making hard choices, right? Because sometimes we hold them accountable to, did they fight and yell loud enough, instead of did they get anything done.
One of the things that I've observed with some politicians that I've known, some pretty well, some not so much, is the ones who've had some other kind of experience that have run something that isn't, they're just not political hacks, tend to be more result oriented. Um, and so making sure we elect people who have some experience beyond running for office, I think that's a big part, and it's our responsibility. But I'm sure you've seen the statistics. What is it, like 20% of the people or 10% of the people think Congress is good, and we keep electing. But my congressperson,
Right.
yours stinks, mine's really good. I a Republican and Democrat former representatives endorsed my book, and I was having lunch with them, and they were talking about, you get elected, you're all pumped up, you go to Washington, and they sit you down and say, if you don't do what we tell you to do, what the party tells you to do, you have no power. That's all about party, and we've got to stop putting party first. If you look at George Washington's farewell address, he talks about the evils of political parties.
Yeah. So tell us about, or tell us, read us the poem. Tell us about the poem, and let us hear it.
Okay. The poem is called Micro Validations because there's a lot of conversations, and people are hurt and they can't talk to each other and they have to go to safe rooms. So this is sort of a anecdote to that, possibly. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. English proverb. Microclimates, microbiomes, microaggressions. We live in a microclimate. Microbiomes live in us. Microaggressions are part of life. What we need more of are micro validations, micro affirmations. We've become trapped in our silos. We've become contemptuous of those who don't agree with us. They must not be human. Our country, our cities, our friends have become divided. We can't keep distancing ourselves from each other. We must hang together, or most assuredly, we will hang separately. Benjamin Franklin. Our children and grandchildren need us to hang together for their future. A healthy democracy requires its citizens to work together to remain free. We need to see our interdependence and break down the barriers that divide us. We need each other. Start with micro validations. Open the door for someone and say hello. Talk to your neighbors. Look people in the eye and acknowledge they exist. Reconnect with each other. Affirm the humanness in everyone. We spend a lot of time looking at the competition as not being human. And if you look at what we had to do in wars when we fought the Germans, when we fought the Japanese, we had to dehumanize them. And we're dehumanizing each other, and that's not sustainable. The stuff that we just saw the last weekend around the world is just makes you want to throw up.
Yeah. So if a listener wants to move sort of from some of these frustrations into contributing, what's the first step? Maybe that you would say, maybe other than joining a movement or adopting an identity.
Okay. Well, the first thing I do is turn off the TV and turn off your phone for a while and go out and breathe some fresh air and go talk to your neighbors. 74% of people do not know all their neighbors. Think about that. And like 10 or 12% don't know any of their neighbors. Shame on you. Get out and talk to people. The second thing is, and a lot of towns have websites you can go to and learn what all other nonprofits are doing or projects. Habitat for Humanity is a great organization. Go out and try, do one project, come up and pick up trash in Tampa Bay and work with Tampa Bay Watch, or go paint a house with Habitat for Humanity, go build a house, go volunteer for some kind of sports team, um, and figure out what you really like to do. What's your calling? Where do you feel comfortable? Where are you going to feel part of something bigger than yourself? And then dedicate some time to it. Not once a year, once a week, once a month. I mean, we're all busy, but you can carve out the time to do the things that are important to you and being part of the community. The second thing is look at more than one news resource. If you hate Fox, if you hate CNBC, good, listen to them both. There's a wonderful organization called All Sides. I don't know if you've heard of it, that takes stories from all the different newspapers and magazines and bring them together, and you can see based on blind surveys whether they're conservative or liberal, and you hear the different, one news story and two or three different perspectives on it. So do your homework. That's your responsibility as a citizen, is to do your homework before you vote for somebody. Otherwise, we'll just keep putting Bubba back in, who, just shows up and raises his hand when the head of the party says, raise your hand.
Mm-hmm. All right. That's some great advice. Well, Chip Webster, thank you so much for making time for our little show.
Glad to do it. I've really enjoyed it.